Anthony Cruz is one of the brightest names in the Philippine business world. As the founder and CEO of Cruz Enterprises, he has built an empire that extends its influence across Asia. On the surface, Anthony is known as a powerful man, capable of controlling everything with just a phone call. Yet, behind the glittering facade, few know that he leads a lonely life within the grandeur of his luxurious mansion. Perched atop an isolated hill, Anthony's mansion bathes in morning sunlight that streams through large glass windows, reflecting off priceless paintings he has collected from around the world. Each artwork, from Monet to Van Gogh, was acquired through prestigious auctions as a way to fill the emptiness in his soul. But no matter how valuable these paintings were, they remained silent companions, unable to converse or bring the warmth Anthony longed for. Anthony has no family. His parents passed away in a car accident when he was just 8 years old. Orphaned, he was taken in by relatives who treated him as a burden rather than a child to love. Driven by greed for his parents' inheritance, they subjected him to both physical and emotional abuse. Those years of neglect and loneliness shaped Anthony into a reserved and stoic individual. However, that pain became the fuel for his rise. Determined to change his fate, Anthony excelled in his studies, worked tirelessly, and never ceased striving. At 20, he earned a full scholarship to one of the Philippines' most prestigious universities. There, he showcased a natural talent for business and quickly gained a reputation for his sharp financial acumen. After graduating, Anthony started his entrepreneurial journey with nothing. With a small loan, he established Cruz Enterprises. And within a few years, his company achieved remarkable growth. Anthony not only became a successful businessman but also a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. Yet, despite his wealth, power, and fame, he couldn't escape the loneliness that had haunted him since childhood. Anthony's daily life unfolded like a meticulously programmed clock. Each morning, he woke up in a vast bedroom where even the birdsong felt out of place. After a breakfast prepared by his private chef, he would sit in his library, a massive room filled with thousands of books, none of which he had ever read past halfway. In the evenings, Anthony returned home after work to the silence of his mansion, where the paintings on the walls seemed to gaze at him with empathetic eyes. Anthony had no real friends. His only relationships were with business partners who cared only for the financial benefits he provided. At lavish parties and major events, Anthony always appeared alone, impeccably dressed but with eyes that betrayed an emptiness. Sometimes, Anthony wondered if all his efforts were worth it. He had built an empire. But at what cost? A life with no one to share it. No one who truly understood him. One evening, as he sat in his living room with an expensive glass of wine in hand, Anthony gazed at Van Gogh's The Starry Night. He thought to himself, Van Gogh could paint skies full of stars. Yet he lived in loneliness and died in obscurity. Perhaps my life is no different from his. It was in that moment that Anthony realized, despite having everything others might envy, he felt as though he had nothing at all. This profound emptiness compelled him to embark on a journey to find the true meaning of life. Though he did not yet know it would all begin with an unexpected encounter by the roadside. It was a day of heavy rain, the gray skies mirroring the somber mood of Anthony Cruz. After a tense meeting with shareholders, Anthony left the office building in his usual silence. His sleek black limousine glided along the empty road, the raindrops tapping against the roof like a melancholic rhythm echoing his thoughts. Sitting in the back seat, Anthony stared out of the window, his gaze unfocused. His mind was a storm of chaotic thoughts about work and the burdens only he could understand. Through the downpour, Anthony's attention was suddenly drawn to a scene on the roadside. A frail woman, wearing a faded raincoat, was struggling to protect a small basket of flowers from the rain. Beside her stood a boy, about 6 years old, holding a tattered umbrella. His tiny hands trembled with cold, but he continued to shield his mother as best as he could. Anthony felt a pang in his chest. He couldn't explain why the sight moved him so deeply. Perhaps it reminded him of his own difficult childhood. Or maybe it was the realization that the woman was fighting life's battles in much the same way he once had. "Stop the car," Anthony suddenly commanded. The driver, surprised, obeyed without question. The car pulled over, and Anthony stepped out, opening a large umbrella to shield himself from the cold rain. He walked toward the woman, his eyes lingering on the fresh flowers in her basket. "Hello," Anthony said, his voice calm yet slightly distant. "Are you selling flowers?" The woman looked up, startled to see the elegantly dressed, powerful man standing before her. After a moment of hesitation, she gave a soft smile. A smile laced with resilience. "Yes, sir. Fresh flowers. Which ones would you like?" she asked. Her voice warm but tinged with weariness. Before Anthony could respond, the boy beside her spoke up, his clear voice cutting through the rain. "Mister, don't be sad anymore. My mom's flowers will make you happy." Anthony was taken aback. The boy's bright eyes seemed to peer into his soul, uncovering the sorrow he had long hidden from the world. He knelt down, looking into the boy's wide eyes. "Why do you think I'm sad?" he asked, his tone gentler now. The boy, Paolo, smiled innocently, his cheeks flushed pink from the cold. "Because you're not smiling. My mom says people who don't smile are usually very sad." Anthony was struck by the simplicity of the statement. How long had it been since he last smiled? How long had he hidden his vulnerabilities behind a facade of strength? Paolo's words pierced through the cold walls he had built around himself. "Then I'll buy some flowers from your mom," Anthony said, pulling out a large bill from his wallet and handing it to the woman. "You're giving too much, sir. I can't take all of this," the woman, Elena, said, her face filled with genuine concern. "It's fine," Anthony replied. "Consider it as if I'm buying the entire basket." Elena wanted to protest, but the sincerity in Anthony's eyes stopped her. Back in the car, Anthony placed the bouquet beside him. The gentle fragrance filled the enclosed space. And for the first time in years, he felt a sense of lightness. The image of the mother and her son lingered in his mind throughout the evening. The next day, Anthony instructed his driver to return to the same street. He wasn't sure why, but he felt compelled to see Elena and Paolo again. When the car stopped, he saw Elena standing there under the scorching sun, her shirt soaked with sweat, yet still smiling as she greeted passing customers. Anthony stepped out, this time shedding his aloofness. "How's business today?" he asked, his tone more genuine. Elena, surprised, quickly responded, "It's all right, sir. A bit easier today without the rain." Paolo appeared from behind her, clutching a small bottle of water. Recognizing Anthony, the boy beamed with joy. "You're back, mister. Did you like the flowers? My mom said they must have looked really pretty at your house." Anthony smiled, a rare, unguarded smile he hadn't even realized he was capable of. "I loved them." "Paolo. How old are you?" I'm 6. But my mom says I'm as smart as a grown-up. Paolo replied, his eyes sparkling. Anthony chuckled softly. You're definitely very smart. In the days that followed, Anthony frequently visited Elena's flower stand. He bought flowers, chatted with her, and gradually learned more about the lives of the mother and son. Elena shared that she had once been a teacher. But after her husband left, she had to quit her job to care for Paolo. Life was hard, but she had never given up hope. Paolo grew fond of Anthony, seeing him as a kind of big friend. He often shared his innocent stories, each one bringing a sense of joy and simplicity that Anthony had long forgotten. Elena, initially wary, began to realize that Anthony was different from the usual wealthy men. Though reserved, he listened intently and showed genuine care. For Anthony, who had spent his life in isolation, something shifted. The presence of Elena and Paolo left an indelible mark on his heart. And he knew his life was about to change forever. Elena was once the pride of the school where she taught. With her warm smile and deep knowledge, she was more than just a teacher, she was a source of inspiration for her students. Back in those days, Elena was full of energy and believed she would have a happy family with the man she once loved deeply. However, life does not always follow the paths we hope for. After giving birth to her son, Paolo, her husband began to change. The pressures of finances, small conflicts, and his growing selfishness became increasingly apparent. One day, when Paolo was just 2 years old, Elena's husband left without a word. Her world crumbled in that moment. As a teacher earning a modest salary, Elena quickly realized she couldn't work full-time while raising her young son alone. After many sleepless nights, she made the heartbreaking decision to leave the career she loved to focus on raising Paolo. Though it pained her to give up her passion, her son became her everything. Elena turned to selling flowers, a job she believed would give her the flexibility to both work and care for Paolo. At first, it was far from easy. She woke up at dawn every day to visit wholesale markets, carefully selecting the freshest flowers at the lowest prices. She then arranged the flowers into small bouquets and took them to the streets to sell. In the early days, rejection and indifference were her constant companions. But Elena refused to give up. With her genuine smile and soft-spoken offers, she gradually gained a loyal base of customers. Though her earnings were modest, she knew how to budget carefully, ensuring every penny went toward Paolo's well-being. Despite his young age, Paolo quickly became aware of his mother's sacrifices. He helped her in any way he could, from arranging flowers to holding an umbrella to shield her from the rain or sun. Paolo never complained about their struggles. Instead, his innocence and sweet words brought Elena daily joy. Each evening, after selling all her flowers, Elena returned to their small house in a poor neighborhood. The home had only one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a corner for Paolo's study. Despite its modesty, Elena worked hard to make it warm and inviting. She crafted paper decorations for the walls and turned weekend cleaning into a fun game she and Paolo could enjoy together. One evening, Paolo asked, "Mom, are we poor?" Elena smiled and replied, "We're not poor, my son. We have love. And that's the most important thing." No matter how tough life was, Elena remained optimistic. To her, each day was a new opportunity to care for her son and build a better future. She often told Paolo, "Life may challenge us, but we must never give up. Together, we can overcome anything." Those words not only helped Paolo grow into a strong and understanding child but also motivated Elena to stay resilient. When Anthony Cruz met Elena and Paolo, he began to feel something different within himself. Every conversation with Elena revealed her strength and selflessness. Unlike anyone he had met before, Elena didn't seek help or pity. She fought her battles with quiet determination, doing everything for her son without complaint. One day, Anthony asked, "Why don't you find another job? Surely you deserve something better." Elena smiled softly, her gaze distant. "Maybe I do. But Paolo deserves more. By doing this, I can be with him every day. I want to watch him grow and teach him the things I don't want anyone else to teach in my place." Anthony was silent, unsure of how to respond. Her answer surprised and humbled him. Paolo, too, grew close to Anthony, sharing cheerful stories about school and his dreams. One day, Paolo innocently asked, "Uncle Anthony, do you have children?" The question startled Anthony. He shook his head, trying to mask the emptiness it stirred in him. "You should have kids, Uncle Anthony. You'd make a great dad," Paolo said, his eyes wide with sincerity. Anthony smiled faintly, but the boy's words lingered in his heart. Paolo and Elena didn't just bring him joy, they made him realize there was something deeply missing in his life. Anthony began to see that Elena's love for Paolo wasn't just about care, it was about unconditional sacrifice. Every flower she sold and every penny she earned went toward her son. Paolo wasn't just her source of strength, he was her reason for living. One evening, Anthony happened upon Elena repairing one of Paolo's old shirts under the dim light of a small lamp. The sight etched itself into his memory, stirring emotions he hadn't felt in years. "Elena, you don't have to do everything alone. I can help," Anthony offered. Elena looked up, her eyes both grateful and resolute. "I appreciate your kindness. But I don't want to rely on anyone. I want to build a life for my son with my own hands, so he can be proud of me." Anthony nodded quietly, understanding her determination. In his heart, Elena and Paolo had become an irreplaceable part of his life, one he didn't want to lose. Anthony Cruz, a man once consumed by work and power, found himself thinking more and more about Elena and Paolo each day. The brief roadside conversations, Paolo's innocent smiles, and Elena's resilient eyes had awakened a feeling in him he thought he had lost, the desire to do something not for personal gain but simply to bring joy to others. Anthony began with small gestures. Each morning, he stopped by Elena's flower stand to buy a bouquet and spend a few minutes talking to her. Gradually, he shed his distant demeanor and began genuinely caring about their lives. One day, during an unexpected downpour, Anthony noticed that Elena and Paolo had no shelter. The following day, he showed up with a large umbrella and a new tarp. "This is so you and your son don't have to get wet when it rains," he said, his tone sincere. Elena hesitated, but Paolo quickly grabbed the umbrella and exclaimed, "Thank you, Uncle Anthony. Now my mom won't get wet anymore." Seeing Paolo's joy, Elena accepted the gift, though she still felt a bit uneasy. But Anthony didn't stop there. One day, when he visited their small home, he noticed the leaking roof and damp, moldy walls. The cramped and dimly lit space tugged at his heart. The next day, Anthony hired a team of workers to repair the roof, repaint the walls, and install a fan to make the room more comfortable. When the workers arrived, Elena asked in surprise, "Anthony, what are you doing?" Anthony simply smiled, This house needs a little fixing. I can't let you and Paolo live in these conditions. But I can't accept this help. Elena said. Her pride evident in her voice. Looking at her with calm resolve. Anthony replied. Elena. This isn't charity. It's what anyone should do when they see a family in need. Think of it as something I'm doing for Paolo because I care about him. Elena saw the sincerity in his words and, though still reluctant, eventually nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Paolo grew increasingly attached to Anthony, treating him like a beloved older friend. Every time they met, Paolo enthusiastically shared stories. Uncle Anthony. I learned a new poem at school today. Let me recite it for you. Paolo said. His eyes sparkling with excitement. Anthony sat down and listened attentively as the boy recited the poem with passion. When Paolo finished, Anthony smiled and clapped, something he rarely did. That was wonderful. Paolo. I think you'll be a talented poet someday. Anthony said. Making the boy blush with pride. Paolo not only brought Anthony joy but also helped him rediscover the meaning of family. When he was with Paolo, Anthony felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The cold, distant man everyone knew was slowly melting away. At first, Elena maintained a distance from Anthony. She knew he was a wealthy and powerful man and didn't want to become a burden or let others think she was taking advantage of him. But Anthony's persistence and genuine kindness gradually changed her perspective. One day, Anthony brought Paolo a new backpack to carry his books and school supplies. Elena was deeply moved. I don't know what to say. Anthony. You've done so much for us already, she said. Her voice trembling with emotion. Elena. I just want to help. I grew up in hardship. And I know what it feels like. You don't need to feel uneasy about this. Anthony replied. For the first time, Elena didn't refuse Anthony's help. She began to see that he wasn't just a wealthy man but someone carrying his own deep scars. Much like her, Anthony started spending more time with Elena and Paolo. Simple dinners at their small home became cherished moments for him. He felt a warmth there that he hadn't known in years. One evening, while they were eating, Paolo suddenly said, Uncle Anthony. You're like part of our family now. Can you come have dinner with us every day? Anthony was taken aback by the boy's words but soon smiled, a genuine smile from his heart. I'd love to. Paolo. Sitting beside them, Elena looked at Anthony with gratitude in her eyes. Though she didn't say it, she knew his presence had brought a new light to their challenging lives. Spending time with Elena and Paolo, Anthony realized that life wasn't just about money or success. Love, care, and the joy found in simple moments were what truly brought happiness. Anthony was no longer the cold, lonely man he once was. He felt connected to a family, a feeling he had lost long ago. Elena and Paolo didn't just change his life, they helped him find himself. From the small flowers Elena sold each day, Anthony discovered a life full of meaning and love. And he knew this was only the beginning of a new journey, one where he would never be alone again. The peaceful life Anthony, Elena, and Paolo had built together was shattered, and a reporter uncovered Anthony's frequent visits to the poor neighborhood where Elena lived. A photo of him smiling brightly beside Elena and Paolo was splashed across major newspapers with sensational headlines: Lonely Billionaire Falls for Single Mother, a Modern Fairy Tale. The article quickly went viral, sparking widespread debate. Some admired the love story between two people from vastly different worlds. However, many were skeptical, accusing Elena of exploiting Anthony's wealth and kindness for personal gain. Elena was stunned to see her photo on the front page. Her first thought was for Paolo. Fearing how the media frenzy might affect her innocent son. Anthony. I didn't want this to happen. I don't want to be a burden to you. Elena said. Her voice full of worry. Anthony. Understanding the pressure Elena was under. Tried to reassure her. Elena. I'll handle this. You don't need to worry. You and Paolo are the most important things to me. But the news didn't just disrupt Anthony's personal life, it sent shockwaves through Cruise Enterprises. Shareholders, concerned about the company's reputation, began to question Anthony's judgment. During a tense board meeting, an elderly shareholder stood up and said, Mr. Cruise, we cannot allow this scandal to tarnish the company's image. If you don't resolve this situation immediately, we will have no choice but to demand your resignation. Anthony, his gaze steady but firm, replied, I understand your concerns. But my personal life does not affect my ability to lead. I've dedicated my entire life to this company. And I will not let anyone doubt my competence. Even so, Anthony knew the pressure was mounting. He needed to find a way to protect both Elena and his position. Amid the chaos, a ghost from Elena's past suddenly reappeared. Her estranged husband, Ramon, who had abandoned her years ago, returned out of nowhere. I want custody of Paolo. My son can't live in these poor conditions anymore. Ramon demanded, confronting Elena. Shocked by his audacity, Elena replied, her voice shaking with anger. You left when we needed you most. Paolo doesn't need you. But Ramon wasn't easily deterred. Learning of Anthony's presence in Elena's life, he saw an opportunity to profit. I'll take you to court for custody. Unless, of course, you want to make a deal, he said. A sly smile spreading across his face. Elena understood that Ramon was after money. But she had no means to meet his demands. When Anthony found out, he was furious but remained composed. He decided to hire the best lawyers to defend Elena and Paolo against any legal threats from Ramon. Elena, I won't let him hurt you or Paolo. I told you I'm here to help. And I'll keep my word. Anthony said. His eyes resolute. Though deeply grateful, Elena was still uneasy. Anthony, I don't want you to get into trouble because of me and Paolo. If I have to, I'll face Ramon on my own. Elena, we're a family. Families don't abandon each other. Anthony replied. His words bringing tears to Elena's eyes. The legal battle between Elena and Ramon was intense. Ramon hired a lawyer to argue that Elena was unfit to care for Paolo. However, Anthony and his legal team were unwavering in their defense. Meanwhile, the media continued to sensationalize the story. Headlines like, "Biological father fights for custody" divided public opinion. Some supported Elena, praising her as a devoted mother, while others sided with Ramon, accusing Anthony of meddling in a broken family. The mounting pressure weighed heavily on Elena. She began to consider leaving Anthony to shield him from the chaos she felt she had brought into his life. One evening, after Paolo had gone to bed, Elena sat down with Anthony. Anthony, I can't let you sacrifice everything for me and Paolo. The media, the shareholders, Ramon, everything is against us. I think I should leave, she said, tears streaming down her face. Anthony was stunned by her words. Elena, I told you that you don't have to face this alone. I don't care what anyone else thinks. All I care about is you and Paolo. But Elena shook her head. tears falling onto her cheeks. "You've done too much for us already. I can't let you lose everything because of us. Let me handle this on my own." Anthony couldn't convince her to stay. The next morning, Elena left, leaving behind a letter thanking him for everything he had done but explaining that she couldn't allow him to pay the price for her troubles. When Elena left, Anthony felt as though his heart had shattered. His vast mansion once again felt cold and empty. And the hollow days he thought were behind him seemed to return. Paolo was equally heartbroken. "Mom, isn't Uncle Anthony coming back? I miss him so much," he said. His eyes filled with sadness. Elena could only hug her son, hiding her own pain. But Anthony knew he couldn't let things end this way. He made a promise to himself: he would find a way to bring Elena and Paolo back into his life. No matter the obstacles ahead. Under the harsh glare of public scrutiny, every move Anthony and Elena made was closely watched. Sensational headlines like "Single Mother Causes Turmoil in Billionaire's Empire" and "Love Story Threatens Cruise Enterprises" dominated the media. For Elena, the pressure didn't just come from the press but also from the judgmental stares of those around her. When she went to sell flowers, whispers followed her wherever she went. "That's the woman dating the billionaire. She's probably just after his money. Love like that doesn't exist." Elena tried to stay calm, but every murmured word felt like a dagger to her pride. She didn't want Paolo to grow up in an environment where his mother was looked down upon. Nor did she want Anthony to bear the burden of constantly defending her and her son. One night, after Paolo had fallen asleep, Elena sat in the corner of their small house, gazing out into the darkness beyond the window. She knew she had to make a difficult decision. Anthony had done so much for her and Paolo. But now she felt that her presence was only harming him. Elena wrote a letter, each word feeling like a knife to her heart. "Anthony, I don't even know where to begin to thank you for everything you've done for me and Paolo. You've brought us joy, warmth, and hope that I thought I would never have again. Paolo adores you like a father. And I know you are the kindest man I've ever met. But, Anthony, I can't let you continue to bear the troubles that my son and I bring. You are an important man. Not just to your company but to so many others. I can't stand to see you lose what you've spent your life building because of us. I'm sorry. But I think it's best for us to part ways. I hope you'll understand my reasons. Thank you for everything. I will always be grateful and wish you find true happiness. Elena." Elena placed the letter on the table, next to a bouquet of flowers she had arranged herself as a farewell gift. She turned to look at Paolo sleeping peacefully, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "I'm doing this for you, Paolo." The next morning, when Anthony arrived at Elena's home as usual, he found the door locked, and the house empty. Spotting the letter on the table, he quickly opened it and read every word. Each sentence struck Anthony like a blow to the chest. He couldn't believe Elena had left without saying goodbye. His hand clenched the letter tightly as his gaze fell on the simple yet heartfelt bouquet she had left behind. Anthony returned to his mansion. But this time, the familiar silence felt suffocating. The paintings on the walls, the gleaming, spacious rooms, everything seemed to amplify the loneliness that enveloped him. He retreated to his library. Once a sanctuary of comfort, now just another reminder of his solitude. Sitting in a chair, he stared blankly at the wall, his mind swirling with memories of Elena and Paolo. Anthony began to sink into depression. He struggled to focus on work, finding meetings exhausting, while the pressure from shareholders only weighed him down further. Every time he saw a bouquet of flowers, He was reminded of Elena and Paolo, their laughter, their warmth, and the joy they had brought into his life. One rainy evening, Anthony sat alone in his living room, staring out at the storm. He remembered the first time he met Elena and Paolo by the roadside. The image of them standing in the rain with a tattered umbrella etched in his mind. He recalled Paolo's innocent smile as he said, "My mom's flowers will make you happy." The memories overwhelmed Anthony. And he couldn't stop asking himself, what did I do wrong? How can I bring them back? Despite his despair, Anthony knew he couldn't give up. He instructed his team to search for Elena. But she seemed to have disappeared. The small house she once lived in was now empty. And the neighbors had no idea where she had gone. Anthony felt powerless. But deep down, he knew he couldn't let the story end this way. He had spent too much time living in loneliness and wasn't about to lose his one chance at a real family. Elsewhere, Paolo keenly felt Anthony's absence. The boy missed their conversations. The way Anthony praised his poems. And the way he listened intently to his innocent tales. "Mom, doesn't Uncle Anthony miss me?" Paolo asked, his eyes brimming with tears. Elena held back her own emotions and hugged her son tightly. "Uncle Anthony misses you very much, Paolo. But we have to let him live his life." Paolo didn't fully understand the meaning of her words but sensed the sadness in her voice. Though deeply hurt, Anthony refused to give up hope. He reminded himself that if he had found Elena and Paolo once, he could find them again. Family isn't just about being there when things are easy, Anthony thought. Family is about never giving up on the people you love, no matter what. With this determination, Anthony began planning how to bring Elena and Paolo back into his life. No matter the challenges that lay ahead. Under intense public scrutiny, Anthony knew that to regain the trust of his shareholders and protect his relationship with Elena, he had to prove that his personal happiness didn't affect his leadership abilities. With meticulous preparation, Anthony stepped into the boardroom, where all eyes were fixed on him. An elderly shareholder, who had been a vocal critic, stood up and said, "Mr. Cruz, we need your assurance that your personal matters will not harm the company." Anthony rose, his gaze steady. "I understand everyone's concerns. But let me emphasize this, I've led Cruz Enterprises since it was a small company. I've weathered countless crises to bring it to where it is today. And I will not let anything diminish my dedication to this organization." He proceeded to outline the company's recent achievements. From major contracts to long-term development strategies. Concluding his speech, he said, "My personal life does not interfere with my ability to lead. But if there's one thing I've learned from my relationship with Elena and Paolo, it's the value of understanding and compassion. These qualities have only made me a better leader." Initially skeptical, the shareholders gradually fell silent, moved by Anthony's candid and heartfelt words. The meeting ended with unanimous agreement that he remained the best person to lead the company. But Anthony wasn't content with simply defending his position at the company. He resolved to help Elena fight for custody of Paolo against Ramon, her greedy and irresponsible ex-husband. Anthony hired a top legal team, not only to protect Elena's rights but also to expose Ramon's true motives. "We need evidence to show that Ramon is unfit to care for Paolo," Anthony told the lawyers. Through their investigation, the legal team uncovered Ramon's history of debts and involvement in illegal activities. These findings were meticulously prepared for the court case. In a meeting with Elena, Anthony said, "Elena, we're not going to let Ramon threaten you and Paolo anymore. It's time to take back control of your lives." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Anthony, I don't know how to thank you. You've done so much for us. Elena. I'm only doing what should have been done long ago. You and Paolo deserve a better life. While the legal battle raged on, Anthony organized a grand charity event to honor single mothers. He wanted the event not only to be a tribute to Elena but also a way to convince her to return. The event was held at a luxurious hotel, attended by prominent figures and the media. In his opening speech, Anthony shared, "Today, we gather to celebrate single mothers, silent heroes who sacrifice so much for their children. I've met one such mother. And she has changed the way I see life. She taught me that strength doesn't come from power or wealth but from love and resilience." The event also featured a fundraiser, with all proceeds going to support struggling single-parent families. Initially, Elena refused the invitation. But for Paolo's sake, she decided to attend. She and Paolo quietly stood at the back of the hall, unnoticed by others. When Anthony finished his speech, Paolo tugged on his mother's hand and said, "Mom, Uncle Anthony is talking about you. Isn't he? I want to see him." Elena hesitated. But Paolo's eager eyes made it impossible for her to refuse. She led him toward Anthony, who was speaking with a group of guests. When Anthony saw them, his eyes lit up. "Elena." "Paolo," he said, his voice catching. Paolo ran to him, wrapping his arms around him. "Uncle Anthony. I missed you so much." Anthony knelt down and hugged the boy tightly. "I missed you too, Paolo." Elena approached, her eyes brimming with emotion. "Anthony. I don't know what to say." Anthony stood and looked directly into her eyes. "Elena. I don't need your gratitude. I just want you and Paolo to come back. We belong together. As a family." After a moment of silence, Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Anthony. I thought leaving was the best thing to do. But now I realize, Paolo, and I need you more than I ever imagined." Paolo, standing between them, held their hands tightly. "We're a family now. Right? Mom? Uncle Anthony?" "Yes, Paolo," Anthony said, his voice filled with emotion. The charity event ended with Anthony, Elena, and Paolo together, like a complete family. Cameras flashed. But this time, Anthony no longer cared about public opinion. He knew he had finally found what mattered most in his life. The charity event Anthony organized was not just a major social event but also a deeply personal milestone. With heartfelt words, Anthony shared his story about the single mother he admired. Every word he spoke was imbued with love and gratitude, silencing the entire hall as emotions filled the air. "That mother," Anthony said, his voice trembling, "taught me not only the meaning of resilience but also that family isn't defined by where you're born, it's found in love and shared bonds." At the back of the room, Elena stood silently, holding Paolo's hand tightly. She couldn't believe Anthony had spoken such words about her in front of hundreds of people. Her heart pounded, overwhelmed with emotion she could neither define nor contain. "Mom. Uncle Anthony is talking about you. Isn't he?" Paolo whispered, his eyes shining with excitement. Elena nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't hold back any longer. "Paolo. Let's go. We need to see Uncle Anthony." As Anthony finished his speech, the hall erupted in applause. He stepped off the stage, trying to hide the emptiness he felt from not seeing Elena there. But as he turned, a small voice called out, full of hope and warmth. Uncle Anthony. Anthony looked down and could hardly believe his eyes. Paolo. He dropped to his knees, arms open wide, and pulled the boy into a tight embrace. I've missed you so much. Paolo hugged him tightly, his voice innocent yet filled with profound truth. Mom misses you too. Uncle Anthony. Please don't make her sad anymore. Anthony's breath hitched. Those simple words struck deep into his heart. When he looked up, Elena was standing a short distance away, her eyes filled with emotion. Anthony stood, walking toward her. She looked at him, her eyes red and glistening. But she managed a small smile. Elena. Anthony said, his voice thick with emotion. You have no idea how much I've missed you and Paolo. I know I've put you under pressure. But I won't let that happen again. I love you. Elena. I love Paolo. Please. Give me a chance to take care of you both. To make up for all you've endured. To everyone's surprise, Anthony knelt before Elena, his gaze steady and sincere. Elena. Please. Let me be a part of your family. The hall fell silent. Every eye on them. Some people were even moved to tears by the raw emotion of the moment. Elena's hands trembled as she looked at Anthony. Anthony. I thought leaving was the best way to protect you and Paolo. But now I see that Paolo and I need you more than I ever imagined. I can't say no to you anymore. Paolo leaped with joy. So Uncle Anthony will be with us forever. Right. Mom. Elena smiled and nodded. Yes. My son. Anthony stood and wrapped Elena and Paolo in a warm embrace. I promise. From now on, we'll never be apart again. We're a family. The applause that followed was even louder than before. The hall seemed to share in the happiness of the moment they had just witnessed. After the event, Anthony didn't just bring Elena and Paolo back to his mansion, he began planning a new life with them. Elena enrolled in a training course to return to her beloved teaching profession. With Anthony's full support, Paolo, thanks to Anthony, attended a better school where he could thrive. But what made him happiest wasn't the new school, it was the fact that every evening, he could sit down for dinner with his mom and Uncle Anthony. Anthony himself changed profoundly. He spent less time on work and more time with his family. Dinners together, park outings, and quiet evenings reading in the living room became the moments he cherished most. No longer the lonely man in a cold, lavish mansion. Anthony found the true meaning of life through Elena and Paolo. Elena also found the peace she thought she'd never have. She realized that happiness wasn't about running from hardships but facing them with the people you love. Paolo, with his innocence and pure heart, had brought together two people from seemingly different worlds. One special evening, as they sat together in the garden, Paolo asked, Uncle Anthony, do you think you're happy now? Anthony smiled, looking at Elena and Paolo. I'm not just happy, Paolo. I'm grateful to have you both in my life. I couldn't ask for anything more. Elena held Anthony's hand and softly said, let's build a family full of love together. Anthony. The warm glow from the small house lit up the three of them, their laughter and joy blending into the night. Their story wasn't just a real-life fairy tale but a lesson in love, sacrifice, and the true meaning of family. It was a conclusion that brought tears not of sadness but of profound emotion. A testament to the power of love and trust.